Hello and welcome everybody, and thank you for joining us in the third chapter in which we trace the harrowing tale of Captain Francisco de Cuellar and some of the sites visited during the course of his adventures here while trying to make it home. In this episode, we are mostly focused on Rossclogher Castle, the remains of which can be seen behind us. Now, Rossclogher is a mid to late medieval Norman-style tower house which was built on an early medieval crannog. Please join us as we explore the people and events centred around this tower house. In the previous episodes, we explored some of the sights seen by de Cuellar after washing ashore at Strige Strand, the horrors witnessed at the burning of the church and the disappointment at not finding the help needed at Newtown Castle. At Newtown, now commonly called Parke, de Cuellar and his group of over 20 surviving Spanish got news of a Spanish ship that was just offshore to where they'd been shipwrecked at Strige. But due to his injured leg, de Cuellar was unable to keep pace and was soon left behind by his own people, which must have been a terrible mix of emotions for all those involved.
Abandoned and alone again, de Cuellar moved through the secluded forest trackways and along the streams in fear of the Sassenach, English horsemen that now hunted after him and the other castaways. After a few days like this, living on blackberries and cress he'd picked from the hedgerows, he came upon a priest. Luckily, both of them spoke Latin, and so the priest was able to tell de Cuellar of a savage lord who, being in conflict with the English, would be more than happy to accommodate as many of those washed ashore as he possibly could. This savage was MacClancy, whose home was the mighty tower house built on an ancient crannog on Lough Melvin, County Leitrim, called Rossclogher Castle.
Again, given food and directions, de Cuellar set off by the streams and then shore of Lough Melvin, near Kinloch, but was then shortly met by a blacksmith who tricked de Cuellar into following the blacksmith back to his home.
Once there, the blacksmith and his wife abused him and forced de Cuellar to work the forge's bellows for more than a week until the same priest happened by and to see him.
Unhappy to see him like this, the priest, using threats of the Lord of Rossclogher's wrath, arranged for de Cuellar's freedom by returning the next day with 4 of MacClancy's men, as well as a Spanish soldier who had already made it to Rossclogher and who then accompanied de Cuellar to the seat of the MacClancys.
The MacClancys were a noble Gaelic family under the O'Rourkes, hailing from the area around the Dartry Mountains in Lough Melvin, near the village of Kinloch. They held 2 main places of residence at this point in time: Duncarbury Castle, a tower house near the Atlantic coast at Tullahan, now near completely levelled; the other and predominant one here, Rossclogher Castle. The crannog on which it was built was most likely constructed in the 6th or 7th centuries and is approximately 100 metres from the southern shore of the lake. It is subcircular in shape, being roughly 21 metres long by 16 metres wide. Built in a relatively deep part of the loch with steep shores, the crannog was constructed by large boulders being dropped into the water until they just breached the surface to form the outermost ring of the crannog, then the inside filled with smaller stones and earth and other materials to help form the main part of the artificial island. Originally, there would have been a timber palisade built all along the perimeter of this man-made island, with attached rectangular house of wooden wattle in the western side of the centre. Tower houses are a form of defensive residence brought to Ireland with the Anglo-Norman invasions of the 12th and 13th centuries, but by the 14th century, some of the native lords had begun to utilise this form for their own castles. Rossclogher Tower House, being one of these, was probably erected in around 1400 AD, with it first being mentioned in 1421, and had a stone bawn wall that was probably only ever less than 2 metres tall. Some say Baron MacClancy built this castle, where he closed up his daughter to protect her from being attacked by the smallpox, which was in Ireland at the time. She, however, got the pox 2 days after being shut up and died, meaning Baron never went into this tower house. On the shore of Lough Melvin, near to where Rossclogher was built, there are a number of buildings, such as a church which seems to have reused a section of wall from a previous tower house, as well as huts and other buildings that would have been there to help provide the castle with staff, food, as well as any other services or items required.
Upon arriving at Rossclogher, de Cuellar was delighted to find that 9 other Spanish had made it to this safe haven. It was here that for many weeks de Cuellar and his fellow Spanish rested up and had their wounds attended to, and in general were provided for. In return, de Cuellar wrote about how he and the other Spanish kept their host beguiled with tales of adventure, as well as other follies, such as reading the palms of the ladies of the courts, saying the most absurd of things, but which seemed to beguile them anyways. As with the priest, Latin was the common language used here.
After a number of weeks though, they got word that the Lord Deputy of Ireland, Sir William Fitzwilliam, was in Ballyshannon, a town only 7 kilometres to the north, and had with him around 1,800 men-at-arms. While this number is most likely exaggerated, there are unfortunately very few contemporary documents that could either confirm or deny this claim.
What can be said is that in the autumn of 1588, the Lord Deputy sent a contingent of men from Ballyshannon to take the Spaniards seeking shelter in Rossclogher after learning of their presence there. The MacLanceys quickly learned of this expedition and its goals through the network of spies they had throughout the countryside.
Upon hearing the news, MacLancy decided to gather his herds and other worldly goods, as well as those in the church, and to then retreat up into the inhospitable lands of the Dartry Mountains, where the locals would be safe from English encroachment. De Cuellar and the other Spanish there made the decision to stay and man the castle's defences against the attackers.
Having made their intentions known to MacLancy, swore to him that they would defend Rossclogher until death and not open the gates for anyone but him, not Spanish, English nor Irish, no one but himself, leaving them provisions to last a half year, as well as 6 matchlock muskets and 6 crossbows, as well as 3 or 4 boatloads of stones that could be thrown from the tower's heights. After which, MacLancy bid them good fortune and departed. I've heard it said by local historians that one of the main reasons that the English were unable to take Rossclogher was due to the fact that they had no large artillery pieces with them, and instead had only a few small field guns. We here have been unable to find any documentation to either confirm or deny this claim, although it does line up with what de Cuellar had said about the shoreline around Rossclogher for kilometres.
He said that
neither could injury be done it, because a league around the town, which is established on the mainland, it is marshy, breast deep, so that even the inhabitants could not get to it except by paths.
And these paths, made up by hidden boulders in shallow waters or bog, placed in irregular patterns, and these would have been kept as locals' only knowledge, thus meaning that this wet and desolate landscape, accompanied by our famous Atlantic weather, could easily prevent a military force from bringing up their big berthas.
This may explain one of the reasons Rossclogher did not fall. This potential lack of artillery, which was, after all, a tower house's main weakness, and without cannons to smash through the walls, could really be quite difficult to take.
At this time, cannons were becoming larger and much more numerous on European battlefields, explaining why the Norman-style tower houses were falling out of favour, with people preferring to build earthen star or bastion forts, as these were much better suited to artillery warfare. But tower houses, where still in use, were still excellent for defence against small arms and infantry. The English, seemingly unable or simply unwilling to approach Rossclogher by the southern marshy coast, took a position on a spit of land called Rossfriar, a peninsula sticking out of the northwest corner of the loch in a southeasterly direction towards Rossclogher. While not directly related to our story, an interesting historical point is that on this spit of land there is a 52 by 44 metre rectangular enclosure now completely overgrown in a coniferous forest. Tradition has it that this is one of the locations used by Micheál O'Clerig and the others in preparation for the 1630s Annals of Ireland, now more commonly called the Annals of the Four Masters. This bit of land, Rossfriar, was still about 600 metres from its nearest point to Rossclogher Crannog, out of firing range but still close enough to shout at and taunt each other. The first day there, the English erected a gallows, and on the second day hung 2 Spaniards that they had found on their march between Ballyshannon and Rossfriar, leaving the bodies of these 2 unfortunate men to sway in the wind. This was meant as a stark reminder to those in the castle of why they should promptly concede to the English and not provoke them any further. But as could be imagined though, this very much had the opposite effect, instead steeling the nerves of the Spanish to resist any English encroachment. 17 days after taking up position against the Spanish occupying Rossclogher, with not any advances being made nor casualties taken from either side, the English forces struck camp and retreated back to rejoin the rest of the Lord Deputy's army, due to the sudden onset of a fierce autumn snowstorm. With Rossclogher Castle successfully defended and the English having withdrawn from the area, it was then felt safe for MacClancy with his family and followers to return to their Lough Melvin homes. Everyone, de Cuellar says, were very impressed by the Spanish in their defence of Rossclogher and seemed determined for them to stay and join the locals permanently, making excuses of why they should delay their departure.
The Lord MacClancy even offered his sister's hand in marriage, which would have not only made de Cuellar family, but of high ranking therein, in order to have him remain there. But de Cuellar told him no, and how he wished to return home to Spain. This declaration visibly displeased the MacClancy chief, who promptly made other similar offers. This was probably because, like many other contemporary chieftains who were in habitual conflict with the English at the time, the MacClancys wished to assemble as many of the lost Spanish as they possibly could, hoping that these men would be able to instruct them in the latest of modern tactics and training available in Europe at the time.
Fearing that they would never be allowed leave if left to the MacClancys, de Cuellar and 4 other Spaniards snuck over the wall and made it ashore in the still, pre-dawn darkness only 2 days after Christmas Day. It was a cold and bitter winter, and these 5 men were stuck out in the middle of it, in unfamiliar surrounds. But despite this, it only took them 20 days to make it on foot to Dunluce Castle on the savage Antrim coast, the next known spot visited by Captain de Cuellar on the course of his journey home. MacClancy, for his part in harbouring Spanish and still having 14 Spanish with him, on top of the general animosity between himself and the English, met his end nearly 2 years later. According to state papers dated the 23rd of April 1590, Sir George Bingham went to arrest MacClancy, finding him by the shore of Lough Melvin. Trying to escape by swimming across the loch to a stronghold, MacClancy was shot, breaking his arm, and was then dragged ashore by Gaelic mercenaries working for the crown. After this, MacClancy was beheaded and his head brought back to Dublin Castle as both evidence and as a trophy for their ever-growing collection.
Please join us in the next episode where we take a look at the final stages of de Cuellar's adventures here in the northwest corner of our sometimes hectic little Atlantic island. Thank you for watching. Don't forget to like and comment, and please do join us again.